There was once a plant so valuable that Rome stored it in the state treasury, alongside gold and silver. Julius Caesar personally kept 680 kilograms of it locked up when he seized power. It appeared on coins. It built an entire city's wealth. For centuries, it was worth its weight in gold. Literally. And then it was gone. Not slowly fading out over generations. Not lost to some ancient plague or natural disaster. Rome consumed it into extinction. Today, we don't even know exactly what it was. No confirmed species. No surviving sample. Just a handful of ancient descriptions, some images stamped on old coins, and a mystery that has never been solved. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe. But only if you genuinely liked it. This is the story of Silphium, the most valuable plant on Earth, and how Rome destroyed it. Let's get into it. In the 4th century BC, if you wanted Silphium, there was exactly one place on Earth you could get it. A narrow strip of coastline in North Africa, roughly 125 miles long and 35 miles wide. A region called Cyrenaica in what is now modern Libya. Green, tiered highlands with an unusually generous rainfall for North Africa. Up to 850 millimeters a year in some parts, nearly as wet as Britain. That specific combination of soil, climate, and geography produced something the rest of the ancient world could not replicate. A weedy, unassuming plant with thick roots, stumpy leaves, and small yellow flowers. It didn't look like much, but what it produced was extraordinary. The sap alone was worth its weight in gold. Dried and grated over food, it transformed everything it touched. Fed to sheep, it made their meat so tender, it commanded a premium across the Mediterranean. Used as medicine, it treated everything from fevers to digestive disorders. And that's before you get to what it did in the bedroom. But we'll come back to that. The Greeks who settled Cyrene understood immediately what they had. This plant was not just valuable, it was theirs exclusively. Nobody else could grow it. Every attempt to transplant it to foreign soil failed. Every attempt to cultivate it in controlled conditions produced nothing useful. It was wild by nature. It belonged to that specific strip of land and nowhere else on Earth. So Cyrene built its entire economy around the fact that they had something nobody else could produce. It appeared on their coins. Almost every piece of currency Cyrene ever minted carried the image of Silphium. Not a king's face, not a god, a plant. That tells you everything about where the real power lived. The city became the wealthiest in Africa. Local kings held a total monopoly on supply. The export trade reached every corner of the Mediterranean world. This is the story of every single source commodity in history. One geography, one supply, one point of failure. The ancient world had Silphium. The modern world has cobalt from the Congo, lithium from the Atacama Desert, and microchips from a handful of factories in Taiwan. When the entire world depends on one place for something irreplaceable, the fragility is built in from the start. Cyrene knew this. They just believed the supply would last forever. It wouldn't. To understand why that fragility became fatal, you first have to understand exactly what Silphium was worth, and why demand for it never stopped growing. The sap was called laser. Once dried and processed, it became the most sought-after condiment in the Roman world. It was grated over everything. Brains, braised flamingo, roasted vegetables, lentils. Roman haute cuisine without laser was like French cooking without butter. It was not a garnish. It was the foundation. And because it could only come from one place on Earth, the price reflected that reality without apology. But food was only the beginning. Silphium appeared 9 times in the writings of Hippocrates alone, 9 separate medical applications documented. By the father of medicine, liver disorders, lung infections, fever, pneumonia, pleurisy, hemorrhoids. The juice of the seeds, roots, and leaves was mixed with wine, pomegranate juice, vinegar, or goat milk, and administered in forms ranging from drinkable medicine to poultices applied directly to the skin. Pliny the Elder recommended fumigating growths with the root. He also warned, in the same breath, never to apply it to a tooth cavity, after a man who tried it threw himself off a building. which tells you something about the potency involved. Then there was the other use, the one that made Silphium unique in the ancient world. Hippocrates wrote detailed instructions for using Silphium to purge the uterus and treat complications from miscarriage. Ancient texts describe its juice being drunk as an aphrodisiac and applied directly as a contraceptive. Roman women used it for reproductive control at a scale that had no parallel anywhere in the ancient world. Some historians believe Silphium was the first genuinely effective contraceptive in human history, used by millions of people across the empire, which would make its extinction not just an ecological loss, but a medical one with consequences that rippled across generations. This is what pharmaceutical monopolies look like today. One compound, one source, infinite demand. The price climbs not because the product changes, but because the supply shrinks and the need never does. Rome didn't just love Silphium. Rome depended on it for food, for medicine, for reproductive autonomy, for wealth. That level of dependence on a single wild plant that nobody could farm was always going to end one way. Here's where the story turns. All of that demand, all of that wealth, all of that dependency rested on a plant that nobody could grow on purpose. Not the Greeks, not the Romans, not the greatest agricultural civilization in the ancient world, a civilization that engineered aqueducts, built roads across continents, and fed a 1 million-person city from a single supply network. They could not figure out how to plant Silphium in a field and have it come back the following year. Every attempt failed. When transplanted to foreign soil, it deteriorated. When grown from seed, the results were unrecognizable. Theophrastus, the father of botany, studied it and concluded that Silphium simply did not submit to cultivation. Some plants, he wrote, are wild by essential character. Silphium was one of them. The Greeks understood this better than Rome ever would. They built careful regulations around how much could be harvested at one time. Leave enough root in the ground and the plant would recover. It was a sustainable system, imperfect but functional. Cyrene prospered for centuries under it. Then Rome arrived. When Rome annexed the region, the rules didn't change overnight. What changed was the incentive structure underneath them. Roman tax burdens on the local population were heavy, and over-harvesting Silphium was the fastest way to pay them. Why leave roots in the ground for next season when you needed the money today? So they took everything. There was also a black market. Unscrupulous dealers selling laser at sky-high prices with no quality controls and no harvest limits anyone actually enforced. Just extraction. Pure, accelerating extraction. Rome didn't destroy Silphium because they were ignorant. They destroyed it because the incentive to consume always outweighed the incentive to conserve. Every individual actor was making a rational decision, and collectively they erased something irreplaceable. Bluefin tuna, rare earth minerals, old-growth rainforest. The economics are identical. The outcome is identical. The only thing that changes is the century. And then the sheep arrived. If over-harvesting was the slow bleed, what happened next was the wound that finished it. Pliny the Elder noticed something that Roman landlords had been quietly exploiting for years. Livestock that grazed on Silphium produced meat so tender and flavorful it sold for a premium across the empire, the ancient equivalent of Wagyu beef. So the landlords fenced off the remaining Silphium fields, not to protect the plant, to fatten their animals on it. The locals eventually tore the fences down themselves, not to graze their own animals, to sabotage their landlords, to drive up the value of their own flocks, to protest the crushing tax burden that had made over-harvesting necessary in the first place. The plant was caught in the crossfire of a class dispute and nobody was protecting it. Meanwhile, the black market was doing its own damage. Dealers were cutting their product with Assa foetida, a pungent substitute that smelled like dung and overcooked cabbage, and selling it as genuine laser. The real Silphium became rarer. The price went up. Higher prices meant more incentive to find and harvest the last remaining plants, and underneath all of it was an ecological fragility that nobody fully understood at the time. Silphium may have been a natural hybrid, a one-time genetic accident between two plant species, which would explain why it couldn't reproduce reliably from seed, why it couldn't be transplanted, why it existed in only one place and nowhere else. It wasn't just rare because of demand. It may have been biologically fragile from the very beginning, a plant that was always one bad decade away from disappearing. Rome didn't cause that fragility, but Rome dismantled every protection that had kept it alive. The harvest limits, gone. The fenced meadows, torn down. The careful Greek understanding of how much the land could give, replaced by tax collectors who had never seen the plant growing and didn't need to. The system that had sustained Silphium for centuries collapsed under the weight of many competing interests, all of them rational, none of them thinking past the next season. What came next was not a mystery, it was an ending. The last known stalk of Silphium was found sometime during the reign of Nero, around 54 AD. A single plant, discovered on the hillsides that had once been so thick with it that an entire civilization was built on the harvest. It was not sold. It was not processed into medicine or grated over a senator's dinner. It was sent directly to the emperor as a curiosity, something strange and rare enough to place in front of the most powerful man on earth, not because it was useful anymore, but because nobody had seen one in so long that simply existing had become remarkable. Within a single lifetime, Silphium had gone from treasury asset to museum piece. The Romans didn't stop wanting it. They just couldn't find it anymore. So they did what we always do when something irreplaceable disappears. They found a substitute and tried to convince themselves it was close enough. Assa foetida, available, pungent, deeply inferior. Its Latin name literally means fetid gum. The Romans considered it a reasonable alternative, not the same, not even close. But available beats extinct every time. The poets went quiet on the subject. The recipes that called for laser became recipes that called for substitutes. Within a few generations, nobody alive had ever tried it. This is the part of the story we keep repeating. We never notice what we are losing while we still have it. We notice the absence, the empty shelf, which brings us to the question nobody has been able to answer for 2,000 years. What actually was it? Not with certainty. Not with the kind of confidence that would let you walk into a field today and point at a plant and say, "That's it." What we have instead are descriptions. Ancient writers telling us it had thick roots covered in black bark, a hollow stalk like fennel, golden leaves resembling celery, a large flower head arranged like the end of a watering can, a milky, pungent sap, unlike anything else available in the ancient world. We have coins. Cyrene stamped Silphium on almost every piece of currency it ever minted. The image is consistent across centuries. A distinctive stalk, broad roots, a seed that is unmistakably heart-shaped, which has led to a separate debate about whether Silphium's seed pod is the origin of the heart symbol we still use today to represent love. The evidence for that specific theory is thin. Scholars have largely dismissed it for lack of any historical continuity between the ancient image and the Victorian-era symbol. But the fact that we are still arguing about it tells you something about how deeply this plant is embedded in cultural memory. Botanists today believe Silphium almost certainly belonged to the Ferula genus, a group of fennel-like plants related to carrots that grow wild as weeds across North Africa and the Mediterranean. The botanical community has been searching for a match ever since. So far, nobody agrees on one. And that uncertainty is itself the lesson. Extinction doesn't just remove a species from the world. It removes the knowledge attached to it. The taste, the smell, the specific chemical compounds that made it irreplaceable. We can find a plant that looks like Silphium. We can find one with similar genetics. But we cannot recover what 2,000 years of absence has erased. The Romans who used it daily could have identified it in an instant. That knowledge died with them. What survives is coins, fragments of text, and the outline of something that was once everywhere. Could it still be out there? Here's the thing nobody tells you at the end of this story. Silphium might not be gone. Libya has had only a handful of proper botanical surveys in its entire modern history. The country is not easy to access and not easy to study. Monique Simmons, Deputy Director of Science at Kew Gardens in London, puts it plainly: it could absolutely still be there. And here is what makes that remarkable. Nobody has ever found silphium seeds at an ancient archaeological site. Researchers regularly turn up seeds of coriander, dill, and other Roman-era plants when excavating. But silphium, the plant that appeared on every coin, that filled the state treasury, that flavoured the food of an entire empire, has left no seed trace anywhere. Not one. That absence is strange. It could mean the plant was so thoroughly consumed that nothing survived. Or it could mean that what we are looking for looks so ordinary that we keep walking past it. Two ferula species still grow wild in Libya today: giant Tangier fennel and giant fennel. Both are related to what silphium is believed to have been. Both grow in exactly the region where silphium once thrived. And then there is the Turkish angle. In 2021, botanist Mahmut Miski made a serious scientific case that Ferula drudeana, a rare plant growing in rocky outskirts in Turkey, is silphium. Serious, peer-reviewed science, also inconclusive. The botanical community remains divided. But what makes this detail worth sitting with is that Miski's group first encountered the plant back in 1983 when local farmers showed it to them. The farmers already knew it. They had a name for it and a use for it. The knowledge never fully disappeared. It just stopped being written down. Silphium's story did not end with Rome. The global trade in medicinal plants is worth billions of dollars today and growing every year. And the vast majority of those plants, just like silphium, are still collected from the wild, not farmed, not cultivated, pulled out of their natural habitats to meet demand that keeps climbing. In South Africa alone, 82 medicinal plant species are currently threatened with extinction. 2 have already vanished entirely. These are not ancient plants lost to history. These are plants disappearing right now, in real time, for exactly the same reasons silphium disappeared 2,000 years ago. High demand, no cultivation alternative, extraction outpacing regeneration, a market that prices rarity as a feature rather than a warning sign. The Romans did not have the science to understand what they were doing to silphium's ecosystem. We do. We have the research, the satellite data, the extinction red lists, the case studies. We are still doing it anyway, which brings us back to Rome and to a question that has no comfortable answer, the question we keep avoiding. Rome didn't lose silphium because they didn't care. They cared enormously. They stored it in the treasury. They built fences around the last remaining fields. None of it was enough, because caring isn't the same as changing the system, and the system always rewarded taking more. Silphium was consumed by the most advanced civilization on Earth, people who knew it was disappearing, people who watched it happen in real time, and still the extraction continued until there was nothing left to extract. We like to think we are different. We have science, we have data, we have satellites tracking deforestation in real time. But knowing and doing have always been two separate things. So here's the question I'll leave you with. If silphium existed today, do you honestly think we'd save it? Drop your answer in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.